Hello, everyone. I'm Neena Gopal. Welcome to Global Express. This is where we dissect developments in our backyard that have an impact on India and its neighborhood. Today, while US President Donald Trump's tariff wars have spared neither friend nor foe and sent inflation spiraling at home, pushing longtime allies in Europe and Asia closer to rising power China, economists are even predicting a dismantling of the post-Cold War economic order. And obviously, Trump's attempts to end the Ukraine-Russia conflict seem to be rapidly fizzling out after Russia keeps up its offensive. But more than that, I think this week, there's one more peace offensive that Trump is knee-deep in. This is the US talks with nuclear Iran. It's another front that he's seeking to close, alongside an ongoing conversation between the Gulf powerhouse Saudi Arabia and the US on the Saudi quest to acquire nuclear technology. That's in return for furthering the Abraham Accords, possibly making peace with Israel, but that's a big if. But a nuclear Iran, a nuclear Saudi Arabia in the future, and a nuclear Israel, that's a nuclear troika that can only spell, I believe, nuclear Armageddon in the Middle East. Talking to us today are two experts on the Middle East. Dr. Waiel S.H. Awwad is a veteran South Asia-based journalist, renowned for his investigative reporting in conflict zones across South Asia and the Middle East since 1979. He's covered conflicts in Sri Lanka's north and Jaffna and Indian Kashmir, in the Kargil invasion, and of course, Afghanistan, West Asia, and the Gulf. He was even held captive in 2003 when he was embedded with US troops, but he managed to escape from those Iraqi captives. Welcome, Dr. Awwad.
Nina, nice for having you. Thank you for having me.
Also with us is Kabir Taneja, Deputy Director and Fellow in Middle East with the Strategic Studies Program at the Observer Research Foundation. He's an author and a prolific commentator with a focus on India's relations with the Middle East and the domestic political dynamics and terrorism by non-state militant actors, and of course, the general security paradigm of the region. Welcome, Mr. Kabir Taneja.
Thank you for having me.
So our first question, I think, has to do with the buzz about the talks between the United States and Iran that has been going on for some weeks now. The talks are ongoing in Muscat. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has managed to persuade Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, that there is value to keeping the doors open to talks, even though both sides are not even in the same room. Literally, it's the Omani officials who are doing the talking, taking the proposals back and forth from all behind closed doors. So what is Iran's end game? Today, very curiously, Dr. Awwad, the man who has arrived in Tehran is the IAEA, the Atomic Energy Body's chief, Rafael Grossi, and also Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince, Prince Khalid. Which is very interesting that both of them should land up in Tehran at the same time. But right now, as the Iranian foreign minister, the spokesperson has actually said, the talks are basically still around sanctions, pressure, threats, intimidation. And US President Donald Trump hasn't hesitated even once in threatening to bomb Iran if it's found to be enriching uranium to weapons level. So my question is, how do you see this in the context of the actual confrontation that is already taking place between Iran and Israel? I mean, Israel has broken the axis of resistance. It's broken Iran's hold in Syria, in Lebanon, Yemen. So is this a weakened Iran or an Iran buying time until it can build up its military and its nuclear strength again?
Thank you, Nina. I think I'll start from where you stopped, and it is actually the angle of the Palestinian issues is focused mainly right now on the talks between the United States and Iran, though they are only specifically talking of the nuclear issues of the Iranian and nothing else, nothing like the ballistic missile, their programs of the rockets and all other drones and whatever their military manufacturing, because the United States have noticed that even they are unable to talk directly with Iran in many issues or use the threat forces that the American President Trump sent 15 points to the to the Iranian to fulfill these points before going to talk or an all-out war. But the Iranians were adamant, and they refused to all these points bluntly to the United States. So I think now we have a different president, a different time. Is different from Obama, different from Trump first sessions, and now because of the Palestinian issues, and I'm sure that because of the Iranian losing influence in the Syria and Lebanon and even in Gaza, and including the Ansar Allah in Yemen, it's a clear indication that Iran may be more focusing now on its own survival kit. But having said that, I would say that the Iranian, to many, feel that the Iranian have helped the American and the Israelis achieving their objective actually in the Middle East rather than helping the Iranian.
In the sense,
in the sense, the Iranian have already went into the non-state actors and supported in the region rather than supported countries to defeat the Israelis or to have a solution for the Palestinian cause. So non-state actors usually are easy to penetrate and to break it down. So you have a pretext to continue the occupation and expansion, and that's where the Israelis are doing. But I think now the focus is mainly on the Iranian nuclear issue, where the Iranian, also the Saudis have shown keen interest this time that they wanted the talk to be more peaceful. Even the UAE guys also, they wanted to see. So you see, the GCC mentality also changed, because when the Iranian reached to a deal with Obama, they were quite upset with the American position. Currently, they are more than happy to find a solution because they know that Iranian threshold of having a nuclear arsenal is very much on the card. So the American cannot afford Iranian nuclear, nor the Israelis. But Israel also at the same time is willing to see that there is a regional war in this region. They have already achieved 6 countries to be destroyed in the region, and only the 7th one, which is Iran, is left. So I think the situation is still turbulent. The talk, it is in its early stage, but there are positive signals. And let us remember that the more Iranian pay Trump money, the more they can buy peace with him.
That's very interesting. So you're basically saying that this is a long game that that Israel and the US are playing, and Iran too, to a certain extent. Do you agree with that, Kabir? I mean, this has taken 10 years. I mean, it's taken 10 years for Iran and Washington to come back to the negotiating table. I mean, there's been a lot of talk about who initiated this first move. And I hear that even during the Biden administration, there were approaches made, and there have been backroom maneuvers ongoing since Trump scrapped the first JCPOA. Which would have actually put Iran on the spot, and hasn't really, because I mean, it has a whole load of very interesting caveats and snapback agreements. Could you just take us through the first JCPOA, if you could, and what it is that Iran is expecting to get from this round of negotiations? With the Trump who was threatening them, and of course Iran has threatened them back as well.
First of all, thank you so much for the invitation, and always a pleasure to share the screen with Dr. Awwad. Look, I mean, it'll take me about a year if we are going through the JCPOA process once again.
No,
but
not all of it. Just the
I
fact
know.
that the JCPOA
but it's very important because a lot of the processes that are being revitalized right now between Iran and the US on the nuclear issue are exactly the same processes that were built for the first JCPOA. So not a lot has changed in that aspect. Let me just give an example to quantify why I'm saying this. Oman, for example, as a mediator, has held sort of Iran's confidence over the past many years that it is probably the most pragmatic actor in the region where mediation talks can take place. So first and foremost, most of the reports that we read couple of or 2 weeks ago said that the letter written by President Donald Trump for Ayatollah Khamenei just on the cusp of these talks was actually delivered by the Emiratis, by the UAE, and
yes,
not Oman. So I think at some level, at least the UAE was hoping that these talks are going to take place in the UAE. But that did not take place, and I think that's for a couple of reasons. As I said, first, the confidence that the Omanis probably have with Tehran, but second, I think it's important for Iran to message that a lot of the processes that they are initiating with the Trump administration are the processes that they have initiated with the Biden administration and with the Obama administration. So there's a continuity that the Iranians are open to dialogue. There's a continuity that the Iranians want to resolve this in some shape or form.
But
Uh,
why is that? What is driving them to even come this far? Will it be willing to go down that road when they're asked to actually, limit its nuclear program?
I mean that to be fair to the Iranians, that they agreed to it till a certain level in the first JCPOA. I mean, it's not the Iranians who sort of tore the thing apart and exited. It was the US basically
No, but
in
the US
2018.
had legitimate concerns
I
on
mean,
whether
no,
it
I know,
was
all those concerns that the Americans had are legitimate concerns. I absolutely agree with that. But if you are dealing, and if your core reason for negotiating is predominantly the nuclear issue. It's nuclear deterrence. It's you want to make sure there's no nuclearization of Iran. Ergo, there is no nuclearization of the region. Then it has to be very, very sort of blinkered negotiations. It's a very technical issue also. It's not just about geopolitics or what Iran wants or what the US wants. There were lots of checks and balances that were put in, which is why the IAEA chief is back in Tehran now. Uh, uh,
yes.
but some of the the nuclear negotiations were about the nuclear program. They were not about non-state militant actors or support for Hamas or Hezbollah or support for such groups in Syria and so on and so forth. I think the US and other countries wanted those paradigms to be part of this encapsulation. But the Iranians said that, look, we are just talking the nuclear issue and we're not talking anything else. And that's what the JCPOA was signed about. So a lot of the discontent that was there, including with President Trump at that point of time, was that it is too narrow. Iran is not delivering on a host of other things that are problematic in the region and problematic for the US also. I don't think that is going to change. I don't think today, considering how far the Iranians have come with the nuclear program, considering some are speculating it could be within a
Absolutely.
month. Within a month, they could operationalize a warhead if they wanted to. So the fundamental thing that has changed today is that the Iranians will not give up nuclear weapons, right? If the language is that suggesting that the deliverable from the Iranian side is going to be that you dismantle the program, which we have heard this language sort of coming out of DC every now and then over the past couple of days, I don't think that is going to take place,
So
right?
what you're saying, Kabir Taneja, is that the US is actually entered these talks believing it can roll back the Iran nuclear program. But Iran is in no mood to do so, coming, as you said,
Iran is too far ahead in the program to roll back right now. It is not
correct.
going to be a rollback. Today, if Iran agrees to do that, it is not a rollback. It's a dismantlement of the program. And the
Hmm.
fact that in 2018 the US exited JCPOA is going to be one of the core reasons why they don't do that, because
So was that a big blunder, you think, on the US's part?
I personally think so. I'd really I think if the idea was to stall nuclearization of the region, I mean, we know for a fact that Israel is almost an undeclared nuclear power
Yes.
in the region. But the problem is, of course, that if Iran gets a warhead, Israel is going to go public. The Saudis are going to chase the same kind of weaponization, and then we have a problem across the region at a scale that we haven't really seen beyond a point, and in a region that is quite fragile. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, so we have seen, for example, North Korea, we forget, but North Korea is a nuclear weapon state now, right? So
Yeah,
that kind
yeah.
of paradigm comes into play when we're talking about nuclearization. The fact that the debate around nuclearization is being encapsulated or cocooned by a host of other issues may be very problematic, not pragmatic, and that is something Iran may not actually look to entertain going forward.
So if I can come back to you, Dr. Awad, why do you think Iran is even exploring something like this, given that, yes, its power, its reach in Syria and Lebanon, even in Yemen is all, and particularly the Hamas in Gaza has been denuded. So what is it that makes Iran believe that it will come out on top of any such negotiation? What is it that it really wants? Because its economy is in a spiral. Prices are very, very high. There is people are very uncomfortable. The Iranian people. Kabir was telling me earlier in our conversation that he just visited Tehran, and so I'll come back to you on that. I'd like to know what is bringing Iran to the negotiating table.
Well, Iran have always been wanted to go back to the negotiating table. In fact, you know that the sanctions have been imposed in Iran have posed a lot of harsh measure for the government and for the people of Iran have suffering under the economic sanctions. And there is a huge, unemployment and inflation, high inflation. And also there is a lots of expenses in the country and the people are unable to bear the cost. But I think the Iranian, they wanted at this stage to not only to lift up the sanction from the United States and European, but they want also guarantee that even President Trump, even if he sign an agreement with the Iranian, will he not withdraw again from it? Will he honor the word of it? That is what the Iranian are saying, that if you want me to sign an agreement with you, what guarantee do you give me that you will not pull out again? And I think if we look at the situation, Nina, in a wider perspective in the region, the United States is not happy with the Iranian geopolitical importance in this part of the world, having relation with China and Russia at the same time, and also having the influence in the region. And let us also remember that the problem with the Iranian and American is not Iranian and Israel. The fight between Iran and Israel was a pretext for the Israelis to occupy more of Syria, expand at the coast of Syria because of the Iranian influence. But we know, all of us know, you and Kabir and myself, that the war between Israel and the Arab world is far beyond the 1979 revolution of Iran. It's since 1948, with the creation of Israel itself and the occupation of the Syrian territories and the 6 days war with Israel. So there is a war with Israel even before the Shah was removed. Shah of Iran, when he was there, Iran was the watchdog for the United States in the Gulf region. So I think the Americans now understand that they cannot survive in the region with their common interest more with the Iranian and therefore rather than having them as an enemy. But because of Israel angle, I think Iranians are also recognizing that the turn is coming to them and the table is turning on them by the Israelis, by the Americans who are going to take on the Iranian. Whether they wanted the government of Iran to fall on its own, have a sort of internal turmoil, let the government goes and let Khamenei dies and let's see what could be the chaotic situation. That's why there was an agreement between Israel, Azerbaijan, Turkey to interfere inside Iran and also attack certain area where they can make the insurgency and secessionist movement more active in Azerbaijanis and Mujahidi Khalq and the Kurdish area with the Kurdistan of Iraq. So all these facts have made the Iranian more hard, more determined and adamant to go for any sort of a deal without any guarantee. Second part also, which is quite important, is the Americans are not worried because of the Iranian going nuclear, by the way. I think the undeclared state of Israel, everybody knows that nobody touched the Israeli nuclear arsenal, it's only Iranian. And Iran have already had a fatwa that they will not go nuclear. But now, if they are, as per the New York Times and the reports from the United States that Netanyahu visit to the United States, the recent visit, was only
what was that about? What was that about?
It was all meant to pursue the American president that Israel going to attack the nuclear installation of Iran. And if that is, the Americans have said no, and they objected to any kind of adventure by the Israelis because that means Iran 100% will go nuclear and nobody can stop the Iranian at that stage. The Americans still think that they have a strength that they can hang on it to bring the Iranian back to the table because of the sanction and the harsh economic situation inside Iran. But I don't think there's going to be more of a change in the Iranian position, at least till the American come forward with a solution, with a point clearly, without a threatening, because the Iranians said we will not accept any sort of a threatening. But I think the condition, the American, if we look at those points where they wanted to dismantle the Popular Front of Iraq, they wanted to dismantle Ansarullah and Hezbollah and pull out the Iranian, and Iran should stop its totally nuclear program and show it to the IAEA dismantled its ballistic missile program. All these things, it doesn't fall on the nuclear issue. There are more to see than actually what has been declared by the American and the negotiated.
That's very interesting. And I'm quite fascinated by the fact that Netanyahu was actually hot-footing into Washington to get permission to bomb Iran's nuclear facilities. That would have set off a huge conflagration
Absolutely.
which would have, burnt the Middle East to the ground. But to come back to you, Kabir, you were in Tehran recently, and you've talked about the fact that the Iranian people were, picking a conservative, moderate, not a conservative, a moderate leader in Masoud Pezeshkian as their president. What kind of impact did you feel when you were interacting with ordinary Iranians and the official Iranians, line? What was the feeling among the people, and are the mullahs aware of the sort of deep distrust and unhappiness at the rising prices and the cost of living?
Look, of course they are aware. I mean, it'll be very strange if they are not aware of what the ground situation is and so on and so forth. But look, as far as Iran is concerned, there is a lot of fatigue when it comes to what the sanctions have done. Right. There is the amount of trade has gone down drastically. There is very little industry, and beyond a point, or the average life of the Iranian hasn't gone northward as fast as it could have. So, but having said that, it's not like the sanctions have been completely debilitated the Iranian economy. I think they have been selling hydrocarbons, that is oil, to the Chinese at a brisk pace. So that has kept the cash flow going, despite the fact that other markets have been unable to purchase Iranian oil. But I think at some level, the talks that the Iranians, or at least that's what my reading of the situation was, the fact that the Iranian election still delivered a victory for the only moderate candidate that was sort of standing in, which is President Pezeshkian, automatically meant that some leeway would have to be given to that person to pursue these kind of engagements. And you have to also, I think, take note that Iran takes quite a lot of pride in the fact that they are probably one of the very few countries in the Islamic world, in that part of the of the world that actually has elections. That it has this process that where people can actually mobilize and vote. I will not get into the veracity of the kind of election that take place, uh, uh, but they take pride in it. So the fact that President Pezeshkian won, and his victory was not undermined per se, but everyone had to go along with his candidature moving forward, automatically meant that that kind of outreach was going to come, because that's what he campaigned on. He wants. But if you talk to generally Iranians, I think most people want an outreach to the West. They want some sort of normalization with the West. They don't see themselves too close to either the Russians or the Chinese. That's a relationship of convenience. That's a relationship of power for the time being. But when it comes to being economically close to a bloc, for a lack of a better term, the Iranians have always been more comfortable and closer to the West. They just want a semblance of return of that. And we saw sort of a trailer of that when the JCPOA was signed. Some of the French companies, the
Yeah.
German companies, they moved into Tehran fairly quickly. Car companies wanted to set up manufacturing units and so on and so forth. So they are chasing that once again. But having said that, in a very, very erratic and difficult geopolitical environment, P5+1 as a block is not there anymore. They
That's actually quite important.
Exactly. So the Europeans are almost sort of in the peripheries at this point of time, because they are bogged down with their own crisis in Ukraine and with Russia, and ironically even with the US at this point of time. We saw that the Iranian foreign minister has gone to Moscow, or is about to go to Moscow.
What is that about is quite would be interesting to find out.
I
Why
think
Abbas Araghchi?
no, because they're still very close to the Russians. Having said that, Historically, also, they've been close to the Russians, not so much the Chinese. He's not dashing towards Beijing at this point of time, but Russia is a close actor. Russia has support along with Iranian supported Bashar al-Assad for a long period of time. They have
Yes.
some overlapping interests, and they would like to preserve that because there is no other entity per se that they can really, really rely on when it comes to backing them at the Security Council, for example. It has to be either the Russians or the Chinese. So a lot of this has to do with how the game is played at the UNSC. It's how the sanctions game is played, and a lot of this push has to come from Pezeshkian because that is what he campaigned on. That is what where even the limited number of people that voted for him because the elections the turnouts weren't great. But the limited number of people that voted show that the last sort of ditch effort, if you may, is still coming from the people saying, "Look, try to fix this. If the Americans are willing to talk, just give it a shot. This may be the last time that we are able to do that."
That's interesting. But I'm curious about why Trump actually scrapped the deal in 18 after Barack Obama had worked so hard at it and now is going back to it. I mean, he's I believe within his administration there is also a huge division between the MAGA crowd and the conservative, the old guard Republicans. So I mean, he doesn't have the backing of the entire sort of administration, so to speak.
Yeah.
And and the other point I wanted to make, maybe you could also comment on that, Dr. Awwad, is what is America's bigger game also? I mean, apart from the fact that everyone says that the Middle East policy is run by Israel, I mean, there is also a huge American presence in the Middle East. I mean, there is Al Udeid Air Base in Doha in Qatar. There's the US base in Diego Garcia and the Fifth Fleet in Bahrain, which has been there for as long as I remember. And now two aircraft carriers in the Gulf waters to counter the Houthis and keep the Red Sea open, and it's also interesting because I mean, in this tit for tat between Jerusalem and Tehran, it's the US which is actually playing a strange role of peacemaker, so to speak.
I think the American made their position very clear that Israel protection and the hegemony of Israel in the region is a prime importer for any American country, no matter what may come.
That's
So
true.
therefore, even the American president currently who says that Gaza war should stop and he wanted to vacate Gaza and make it into a Gaza Rivera, he himself also gave him the maximum illegal arms, which is banned internationally, and to Netanyahu to continue the genocide in Gaza and even in West Bank, where we have more than 60,000 Palestinians, in fact, has been now refugees within the refugees area. So therefore, they have been kicked and out of their houses because of the expansion, because Netanyahu's right-wing government parties, they are already on getting popularity of vacating the Palestinian and building more settlements. So therefore, there's no question of a Palestinian issue. So the Americans have made it very clear on these issues. And I don't think President Trump is less Zionist than Netanyahu himself. So let's put it that way. So I think America, Israel have an objective in this region. They have a project. The American project may differ from the Israeli project, which is an expansion from the Euphrates to Nile, and they are already taken more than 65 kilometers deep inside Syrian territories. They have occupied the south of Syria, 3 provinces actually now. Suwaida, Daraa, and Quneitra are under the Israeli because, as I told you earlier, some of the program that there was American companies have discovered oil in the Golan in 2014, and the tributary were deep inside Syrian territory, 65 kilometers. But Israel was happily saying that we have been funding Julani and funding the Syrian Hayat Tahrir al-Sham since 2013. They were paying them salary. So nobody give you free lunch. They were already gaining the ground in Syria. They are already gaining the upper hand on Palestine, on Hezbollah in Lebanon. And let me speak in a wider perspective way, strategically. Let me put it for you in the big power games. At the end of the day, Nina, we know that it is the American who wanted to control the global oil and trade passage in that part of the world. America is not weathering out from there. So you have Bab el-Mandeb, the Red Sea, the Suez Canal. You have also the Strait of Hormuz, where you have more than 34% of world trade comes from this part of the world. And if the American put pressure on the Chinese and the Russians, and the Korean and the Japanese, America can control this passage. And that has been the objective from day one. For even involving the Houthis, Ansarullah, and this war is not because of the Palestinian, but we know that the American can take on the Houthis and all this military buildup. Currently, the American have so many eggs in their basket, they cannot go for a war with the Iranian. They wanted first to consolidate their position in the Red Sea. They wanted to make a military bridge from Djibouti in Africa to Adan in Yemen to control the passage of Bab el-Mandeb. Then they are able to tie the nose on the Egyptian who is opposing to the Hamas people, the Palestinian, to go into Sinai Peninsula because there is a Ben Gurion Canal, which is Netanyahu is already talking about of an alternative to Suez Canal, where he's thinking of $9 billion annually revenue comes from that canal. Then you are having the Iranian Strait of Hormuz, where this can happen. So the Iranian have told the American that any flight, and they told the neighbors of the American, the GCC country, any flight takes off from the military bases of the United States, it's a legitimate target for the Iranian. And the Americans were surprised to know that the Iranian have an anti-ballistic missile system that even the American and the Chinese and the Russian still are puzzled how much they can be better than their system. So I think
they demonstrated it, didn't they? They demonstrated it beautifully when Iran and Israel were at war, were literally firing missiles at each other when the hypersonic missile hit an Israeli airbase.
So Iran have learned it the hard way, and they will not like to surrender like Iraqi, like Libyan, but they are like the North Korean. They wanted to know what stopped the American from invading and destroying the country. And I think that is where the American understand that the use of power is not on their hand at the moment. At the moment, they want to consolidate, as I said. But I also come to the point, we are dealing with a president who only knows money. Look, the Saudis is paying him now $1 trillion. The Emirat is paying $1.5 to $2 trillion. The Iranian may come with $3 trillion for the American. So he will be more than happy. And apply the maximum pressure on the Iranian for a maximum gain from bargaining chips. So we do not know yet in the negotiation. I think we have to see the movement of this negotiation, where it is heading. Are they reaching to any sort of an agreement or a point forward? If the meeting taking place in Rome, where they will be also with the mediating from the Sultanate of Oman, it is in Italy, but still Oman is the mediators. I think there is some sort of movement happening on those fronts, at least on the nuclear issue. Rest of the issue, American will not speak currently because they know that the public opinion are against the American because of his policy in the tariff sanctions against all the world, friends and foes. But I think America first is unable to he is unable to give an alternative to the Chinese, which have more influence in this part of the world. So America cannot keep on using the stick without the carrots. The carrots now in the hand of the Chinese. American have to have a way of wooing back their allies into their fold, rather than having a sort of a confrontation by containing China without giving an alternative to their allies.
That's very interesting. Taneja, do you want to comment on this? I mean, especially now that we have a view that the America really does have its ears to the ground, and it really has a strategy in place to keep the shipping lanes open, and it's not working blindly but then what is Saudi Arabia's role going to be? Because I mean, the Saudi Arabian crown prince landing in Tehran is very interesting. I mean, this was a deal that China had brokered between Shia Iran and Sunni Saudi Arabia. So where do you see that going?
Okay, so first, let me just go back a little bit. You had asked in the beginning that why did Trump tear up the JCPOA
Yes.
in 2018? Look, as I said, first and foremost, I think just the fact that it was negotiated in the Obama administration played a decent amount part. That the legacy could not be given to Obama, that there was normalization between US and Iran. But secondly, there were enough conservatives within the American system at that point of time that did not agree with the deal. And I'm not even talking about the MAGA cultists because they came much later. There were enough people within the conservative circles that said that Iran is being let go very easily and cheaply just around the nuclear deal while they continue to spread their proxy battles across the region. And that is a core concern that America's Arab partners had that was not being addressed. Not just Arab partners, even Israel had that. So the Arabs and the Israel were sort of on the same position on the expansion of Iranian proxies that the US was not really addressing through that deal. And instead of that being addressed, the markets would be opened up. Iranian economy will be jump started, and they will become more and more powerful as the years go by as part of the deal. So I think
Yeah.
there was these are some of the at least concerns that were behind Trump's mind. It was not just a Trump decision. I think it was at that point of time a conservative circle decision, the circle that does not exist today. Right. So
Mm.
Trump at that time was surrounded by conservatives like John Bolton and a few of other people like Steve Bannon and so on and so forth. Steve Bannon criticizes Donald Trump today for his decision making. John
That's
Bolton
right.
also criticizes Donald Trump today on his decision making. Today he's surrounded by a whole different league of people that if they market let's say a bombing of any of the Iranian nuclear facilities tomorrow, the crisis point for everyone is that Trump just might do it. That there are no barriers, there are no checks and balances in the White House at this point of time. Now, contrary to that, we have heard reports, for example, that there are sort of anti-interventionists within Trump's circle now being brought in closer to him to at least whisper into his ears the consequences that could be there. One of the biggest consequences was going to be that he ran his campaign on being a non-interventionist, that the Americans
Mm.
were tired now of trying to be the police of the world. But if he was going to do this from an Iranian perspective, he is going to be policing. So there is this crisis in DC on what the American role is going to be in the next 10,
Yeah.
20 years, right? Is Pax Americana still something that interests DC and Trump or the likes of Trump, or they want to sort of regress from that role and just sort of see it from afar, protect their interests and so on and so forth. Now, the
Yeah,
second
but
part.
clearly Pax America is on the retreat in Europe for sure. I
So,
think they want to
I
concentrate
mean,
on China,
but
but this Middle East quagmire is something they
but
can't
but
get
but but
there.
but to be fair, I mean the Europeans had it coming. I mean it's not the Europeans were living in a panacea of cheap energy security from the Russians, free military security from the Americans, and had the best museums and summer vacation plots that they could offer to the world. But other
What
than
was the
that,
other point you were going to make?
no, so I was just coming back. That was one. Just very quickly, sort of segueing back into why Netanyahu was in DC. Look,
Uh-huh.
that trip didn't go well for Netanyahu.
Yes.
He landed expecting headlines to be in his favor, but he landed when the tariffs were announced. So first
Mm.
and foremost, it was tariffs everywhere globally. Hardly anyone other than the Israeli press covered that the fact that he was there, at least covered in a certain sort of wavelength that was being expected. But the second thing is that Trump announced that they're going to talk to the Iranians while Netanyahu was sitting there, forcing him to nod and accept what was being done, despite the fact that he, in a private conversation, perhaps would have tried to dissuade as hard as possible for Trump to not go down that path. Because if you remember in the UNGA back in the JCPOA era, he came with graphs of a
Yes.
ticking time bomb of where the nuclear program is. The nuclear program is much further down now in that graph than it was previously. And just very quickly, when we are talking about, even as Dr. Awwad mentioned, the issue of Gaza, the Israelis were trying to manage Gaza even through the Qataris. That is why there is a crisis inside Israel right now between the Netanyahu government and Shin Bet, the intelligence agency,
Oh.
over Netanyahu's sort of outreach to the Qataris to try and manage Gaza previously using money and clout and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of moving parcels when it comes to this region at this point of time. But as we're finally coming to Saudi Arabia, look, this is the Saudi problem. The Saudis know for a fact that the kind of security that they require to thrive under cannot be provided by the Saudis themselves. Right. So with that is where the Americans come into play. So a US power retreating is very bad news for the House of Saud. The security of the kingdom, the monarchy, is quasi guaranteed by American power. And if that power is not there, then the messaging has to be done, which the Saudis did with China and Iran, saying that okay, if you guys are not going to play that role, then we have to start hedging against your interests. in the not just in the region but globally. If you see even how the Saudis voted in the UN in the initial stages of the Ukraine war, it was almost an anti-US position, right? Sort of, they were not doing what Washington wanted them to do, and that was also messaging. So if you see, for example, President Trump's vocabulary when he's talking about, let's say, the two aircraft carriers
Yeah.
in the region, he says that we are providing you security. What are you giving us? Which is why the announcements of these $1 trillion, $600 billion in investments into the US, which I really doubt will ever touch those numbers, but it is something that Trump likes. Fareed Zakaria said a very interesting point in one of his commentaries when the whole Zelensky and Trump fracas happened. And he said, Zelensky should have been smart, come up with a new medal that the Ukrainians are coming up with, given the first medal to Trump, and then gone into the conversation, because that would have pacified the Trump ego at that point of time. So everyone is trying
Yeah.
to, make sure on how to, at least for the next 2 years before the midterms come, make sure that how do you navigate and keep
Yeah.
American security structures from collapsing everywhere, because the
Yeah.
time required to replace them is not being afforded to any country, including Europe and including those in the Middle East. They need time to come up with solutions to that security vacuum. And right now, the crisis is that the Trump administration is refusing to give that time.
Yeah, and also going back to the actual JPCOA, and at that point in time when Trump scrapped it, after that, the Israelis made targeted very senior people within Iran. I mean, they bumped off Qasem Soleimania in 2020. They bumped off, a very senior Iranian nuclear scientist. Also at the end of 2020, and Iran then resumed its nuclear activities. It says Iran is saying it wants security guarantees, that it to open up its nuclear facilities to international inspections. But the point is that I believe the IAEA is saying that in 2023, Iran had enriched trace amounts of uranium to nearly weapons grade level. So, is it going to be a small little provocation like the Revolutionary Guards, being targeted, when the Revolutionary Guards are already, dubbed a terrorist organization? So will that continue? Will that be a stumbling block? Is
Look,
also,
yeah, I mean, look, yeah, I mean, Qasem Soleimani was bumped off by the Americans and not the Israelis, right?
okay.
And that's a whole different story. If you look at the accounts that came out later on, much later on, that was about basically giving a host of options to President Trump. And he chose the one that no one expects the president will take, which is basically assassination. So, and once, of course, the president said, yes, you do this, they had to do it. But and you're correct, they've tried to assassinate multiple nuclear scientists inside Iran. Not just that, they've tried to ransack nuclear facilities as well to get information out, which also Netanyahu has presented at the UN. But look, the fact remains that Iran is still considered as a breakout state. The breakout state meaning it is not far from a nuclear weapon, despite the challenges. And the Israelis, I think, they have experience in dismantling nuclear programs, right? They did that in Iraq. They've done that in Syria using airstrikes, but at a time when nuclear programs were absolutely in the nascent stages, not this far ahead, where even places like Natanz and Fordow and so on are supposed to be very, very fortified, inside mountain crevices, and it'll be very difficult even for the long-range strategic bombers that the US has placed in Diego Garcia, as Dr. Awwad was saying, because there are a lot of Arab countries disallowing use of bases to target Iran. Even
Yeah.
they may struggle to deal a death blow to these facilities, right? If it comes to that. But what they may target is, like mentioned before, the ballistic missile program. Because what will you
Yeah.
do with a warhead if you can't deliver it?
Correct.
Iran has very limited capacities militarily to deliver the warheads.
Absolutely.
Largely based on ballistic missiles. They have a very their air force is stocked with very, very old 1970s pre-revolution planes, mostly American F-14s, believe it or not. And they're trying, from what I know, they're trying very hard for a long period of time to sort of jugaad them, as we call it in India, and try to put them up as platforms to deliver nuclear weapons, but they haven't been very successful. So it comes down to ballistic missiles. That's the only way they'll be
Yeah.
able to actually launch something. So those are, again, those facilities may be more targetable if this happens, rather than the nuclear facilities, which will have a limited impact, and the Iranians will rebuild in a fairly quick amount of time.
Dr. Awwad, if I could come back to you, on Saudi Arabia and its push for nuclear weapons, how serious is Riyadh about it? Because, Saudi says now that it wants to be consulted on these nuclear talks that are happening between Washington and Tehran, because it says it will be most affected, the country that will be the most affected if a nuclear-armed Iran detonates a nuclear weapon. Do you agree with that? I mean, in the sense, is Iran really seen as a threat within Saudi Arabia, even after this, suppose, rapprochement, so to speak, between the two countries?
Well, I think the Iranian are trying to reach to the neighbors, especially to Saudi Arabia, through the Chinese mediation, and they're giving them assurances that there will be no attack and there will be no targeting of any Saudi interest in the region. And I think the vice versa also was commitment given from the Arab side. There was some sort of a normalization for the disliking of the United States and for the Israelis, actually. So we have seen some sort of a reapproachment. But let me put it bluntly for you. Do you think if American attack Iran and end the screw coal in the Arab world, do you think there is a pretext for the American to stay back? I mean, the American president himself said that if I am not protecting the GCC country, Iran will take them in 15 days. So he wanted to milk out the Arab countries with the maximum money he can take out under the pretext that they are protecting the American. So if the Iranian threat goes, I think the American have no other to find another a devil, or to dehumanize another country to show that there is a threat. This is one of the issues. We understand the American policy in the region. The second part, which is people are missing here, that even if the Iranian goes to nuclear, definitely the Saudi wanted to go, definitely the Emirati will go, definitely the German will go nuclear, even the South Korean will go nuclear. There is a movement now of allowing by the American their allies to go nuclear. So if that is the case, then we have a nuclear race in the region. And I think the Iranian have the power to deliver ballistic missile, which could be more harmful to Israel, especially at the Dimona nuclear site, where the Israeli were worried that the Iranian rocket can hit without even the dome system can stop them. So therefore, there is a new changes in the technology and the Star Wars which the people are being using. And I think the Americans are not willing to see even dismantling of the Iranian nuclear program at this stage very fast. They need to take a negotiation, prolong the negotiation. Maybe Israel may not be very happy with the ongoing discussion or any kind of approach between US and Iran. But let us also remember that American President Trump, when he pulled out of the agreement, it was part of his manifesto for the election that he wanted to withdraw, and that's where he got the lobby of the Israeli lobby supporting him. Now he's giving Gaza, he's giving West Bank to the Israelis, so they are quite happy with his second term. So he wanted to reach a sort of a deal with the Iranian. Not only that, he wanted to tell the American that I can apply maximum pressure on the Iranian to be myself is reaching a good deal without allowing the money to go in the hand of terrorist organization, where the American was accusing Iran of getting all this money, of the improving its economic sanction and paying for their proxies in the region. I think the situation is more complex, and there is lots of turbulent water in the Middle East and in West Asia, and America trying to fish in the turbulent water.
Dr. Awwad, you also brought up the fact that the huge, wherever Iran had influence and has now been sort of, cut off at the knees, there have been amazingly horrific reprisals against minorities, the Alawites, the Christians. Yeah. What is that all about? Who is behind it?
Well, it is whoever brought these people into power, because this is the retribution. They are paying the price for standing with the Syrian government or standing against the Israeli hegemony in the region. And that's why they've been attacking. And in fact, there is a rising voices inside Syria calling for international protection, because till now, the Syrian government is not controlled of only one third of Syria. One third is occupied by the United States, the other one third by Israel and Turkey as well. So nothing left inside Syria to really protect. So there is, the minorities are at the receiving end. And I think there are lots of pressure also to create some sort of a right to protection under the article of UN Security Council applied in Yugoslavia and in Rwanda. They wanted to apply it in Syria, maybe later on, not now, when they will take on the Islamists inside Syria. But at the moment, as long as the government of Syria is saying to Israel, we are not going for a war, we wanted to normalize relation. The American president wanted to reactivate the Abraham Accord. We wanted to see more of the Saudis maybe coming in fold of the normalization with Israel. So there are lots of movement in the region. I think they're quite interesting to watch. And maybe in some other program, you will see that the trends inside the West Asia gives you what could be the next move for the American and the Israelis and the rest of the Arab countries in finding whether should we go nuclear, whether should we go for a war, or whether there will be a stability or disintegration of the Arab world, which is more likely.
Yeah. On Iran's nuclear arsenal itself, Kavita Neja, the IAEA says that all the nuclear facilities in Iran, that's including Fordo, Natanz, the Arak nuclear facilities, that Iraq had once agreed not to produce highly enriched uranium or plutonium for a nuclear weapon, and that they'd agreed also that these facilities would only be used for medicines. But IAEA inspectors are now saying there are undeclared sites where dual use material is being forged. They say that Iran has deliberately exceeded its limits, that it has a stockpile of enriched uranium. It's resumed heavy water production at Arak, and enriching uranium and Fordo. So what is the actual situation, where Iran's nuclear power is concerned? It's apparently in October 2020 at Natanz, it began constructing a centrifuge production center. So there seems to be a lot of developments that are taking place that have gone beyond the eyes of the IAEA, which has apparently been blocked and where surveillance cameras have all been destroyed. So how is it that that Iran is going to be monitored in the coming weeks during these negotiations? Will it actually offer up a kind of a formula, or what do you see happening?
Look, I mean, even the last time when the JCPOA was signed in 2015, it offered a formula basically, right? Now the problem with the formulas being offered is that what is the middle ground for all the sides to converge towards? Most of the time, it's very difficult to find, let's say, at that point of time, at least in 2015, the European powers, even Russia and China at times were divergent to Iran's positions when it came to surveillance of some of these facilities. So the similar kind of negotiations are going to take place. The problem for me is that considering how and where the Iranians have been for a long period of time, that is quite isolated from the global discourse, from the global order, heavily sanctioned for a long period of time. Uh, uh, they will not put all their eggs in one basket, right? So I think even a nuclear deal is basically could be Iran giving up 60% of their access or 70% of their access.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's just my reading of the situation, right? So that there is enough. I mean, there is enough to offer to the international community when it to make them make sure that yes, politically they are not rushing towards a nuclear weapon, but also give them enough space that if that rush has to take place in an emergency situation or is a requirement in a short period of time, that they can conduct that as well. It be so considering where Iran is, which is always call Iran a survivalist state. It survives in any kind of geopolitical conundrum that is thrown at it. It'd be very surprising to me that they come to the table and basically say, look, we are opening everything up to you. and we don't want to make a
Absolutely.
nuclear weapon. So I think, and that was also a lot of the concern that was there in 2015, where they were saying the compromises that have been offered by the Iranians are just not enough for that deal to take place. But obviously at that point of time, the Obama administration saw it as the best option forward, and it's still being debated whether it was or it was not. But it was, in my personal opinion, it was a good step forward because the other alternatives are kinetic in nature, and that is going to benefit absolutely no one in the region or in the world.
But Iran has always been one of the best negotiators there are, Dr. Awwad. I
Absolutely.
mean, there's no question that
I mean,
they
look,
know.
it's put. I mean, if you see it from that perspective, putting Steve Witkoff next to Agarchi or Jawad Zarif or something, it'd be a masterclass for Witkoff at least in the beginning on considering these guys have
How
been
to negotiate.
negotiating. Considering these guys have been specifically these guys have been negotiating with the US and the West for almost 15, 20 years now. And Witkoff is basically a property dealer who's come into this role for God knows what reasons. But problematic is also that he's handling Ukraine and Gaza and Iran all at the same time, which was not even the case under Biden. There were specific people handling the Middle East and so on and so forth. So I think we'll have to wait and see. But absolutely, as far as the negotiation game goes, the Iranians will come in very, very strong and very, very hard, just out of experience and nothing else.
I mean, it's obviously, Dr. Awad, it's not going to be just on on their enrichment program. It's also going to be on unfreezing these billions of dollars that have been frozen. Do you think that U.S. negotiators are even aware that this is something that they could be faced, that they would be forced to give in, at least, at some point, to get something extract something, some peace out of Iran?
Well, I think the Iranian, that's what Iran want. That's what Tehran wanted actually out of the outcome of this. The talk is that the lifting of the sanction, coming back into the international financial system, getting back into their defreezing all their assets, which the American have done it since the removal of Shah of Iran 1979. There are billions of dollars of Iranian in the American banks. And there is, we have to remember that the Iranian, the best carpet in the world is Iranian. And we all know
It's
that it
true.
takes years to knit that a good carpet. So the Iranian foreign policy is linked to knitting of a carpets in Iran. That means they are very patient. They use a strategic patience in reaching to their achievement or their goals in this. So I think the wisdom of the negotiation for the Iranian is to impose their own demands on the American, and that the legitimate demands. And the legitimate demand is that if you wanted me to dismantle my nuclear, this you have to also yourself show some point of flexibility in lifting up the sanction. That's what the deal was all about. So why to give you all everything you want without even getting anything out of you? And I think the Iranian learned, as I said, from Iraq, from Libya, from North Korea. North Korea didn't go nuclear because they wanted to go nuclear, actually. Let me put it also bluntly here. They went because the American pulled out of the negotiation between the six nations that they were negotiating the Korean Peninsula. So therefore, Iran, if they feel that the American, they can attack or their installations with the Israelis, they have learned the hard way of making cities underground, where even the Israelis are now puzzled where to attack inside Iran. They might have harmed the Iranian recently of the bombing happened there, but they know that the Iranian have learned the hard lesson and the hard way of safeguard their own interest when it comes to their own survival. I think it is the act of survival everybody is trying to play, and to win the war without losing any foot on the ground or losing any
So
boots.
to wrap up, Dr. Awad, what do you see happening in the next few weeks? Do you think, I mean, even where India is concerned, India is a great friend of Iran's for a very, very long time and has held back from criticizing Iran. It's done the same thing with it's befriended Israel. So it's also, sort of treading a very thin line here.
Well,
You know,
I think India is the one of the major stakeholder in this region. Let me say that India has the natural extension of the West Asia, barring the division in the subcontinent. India was naturally continuity of India into West Asia. Therefore, India have the energy security, the food security, the diaspora security, and I think the stability in the region one of the prime important for India. Remember, there is I2U2 program corridor, there is IMAC, There is also another project of going through Iraq into Europe, of all the new diplomatic, I call it pipelines diplomacy, which has been coming and taking place all over the region as an alternative to the Red Sea and the Sinai Peninsula, to promote Israel in the region and endorse Israel as a part of the Arab world, actually. And that is the whole aim and objective of the United States, by bringing back the Abraham Accord and bringing Israel into normalcy without giving the Palestinians their food. But I believe, and I still believe, if there is no solution to the Palestinian crisis, without any political solution to the crisis, the West Asia will remain in turmoil, and this integration and interfighting is going to be flaring up in the coming months. And I'm afraid that there will be more of Islamists, more of extremism, more of fundamentalism growing in this part of the world, which will spread not only from Damascus to Jiangping in China, but it is from Mauritania, North Africa, even to China. So I think everybody has to fasten his belt and face the consequences of an American using the terrorism as a tool to achieve its own objective in the region.
That's quite frightening. Kabir Taneja, if I can end with you, the status of these negotiations couldn't be, I mean, it couldn't really, the stakes couldn't be higher. I mean, there are major geopolitical tensions which are, precluding a peace deal, and Trump's threatening Iran and Iran threatening, Israel. These are not, basically don't add up to a great peace in the future. What do you have to say about this at this
So quickly, just
juncture?
very 2 points. Let me also just go back to the question that you put to Dr. Awwad on India-Iran before I come to this. Look, all said and done, yes, India has close relations with Iran, has had so historically, and so on and so forth. And even in India, we have billions of dollars of Iranian oil money still lying around that the Iranians can't access.
Yes.
But more importantly, on these issues, India was also under sanctions for a long period of time. So India has this sort of common experience with Iran of both on what deterrence can deliver, considering now imagine if India was not a nuclear power today, what kind of security scenarios we would be facing, and on the fact that when you rush towards deterrence through nuclearization, that you do come under sanctions. So India and Iran have a very similar sort of experience on strategically different sort of realities, but ultimately when we are talking about nuclear deterrence, is the same aim for everyone at the end of the day. On the negotiations, look, even the JCPOA were very painstaking negotiations, right? Even the Iranians really squished everything that was required of the negotiating parties on what they wanted. Now the thing that is interesting here is there's a very interesting term that a colleague of mine who's a former ambassador used, is that the Iranians understand also that much like themselves, Trump is also a bazari, right? He also likes deals.
Yeah, absolutely.
So they might see this as an opportunity to not necessarily, or even maybe give some leeway to Trump so that they can sign something or come to some sort of conclusion within a year or maybe 2 years, and not really take it to half a decade or something more that has been sort of has happened previously. So just because Trump is keen on deals, they may look at some sort of leeway and then demand some sort of leeway from that side, and come to a faster conclusion on these negotiations than many would expect. And I think the Iranians might just buy into that ideation to get something out of Trump before his term ends.
No, that's very interesting. Anyway, I can only say this in conclusion, that Iran is no pushover. It's not Saddam Hussein's Iraq. It's not Muammar Gaddafi's Libya. I mean, and Iran's military capability may not be much on the ground, but its ability to damage Israel is very much a possibility. And I'm presuming that all of this, as you both have very rightly put, is that it is about Iran hoping to unfreeze the billions of dollars in frozen assets that it needs to, and also be able to continue to sell its crude The big question, of course, is whether Trump, as you said, the Bazari, will actually be able to do a deal with the Iranians and revisit, sort of a new version of the JCPOA that Iran can be held to account for. Thank you very much, Dr. Waiel S.H, for coming on the show. Thank you, Kavita Neja, for your valuable insights.
Thank
you, viewers, for watching Global Express. Please do click and share the program where you can. Thank you.